For thousands of years, humans have asked themselves, who am I? Am I truly free? Is there something beyond what I can see and touch every day? These aren't questions reserved for philosophers or monks meditating in remote mountains. These are the questions we all ask, especially in moments of crisis, loss, or sudden clarity. Maybe you're asking them right now. This video might sound spiritual at first glance, but what you're about to explore is actually a system, a 12-layer map of consciousness, grounded in modern science like quantum physics and unified field theory, woven together with ancient wisdom from Eastern and Western philosophy, and rooted in real human experience. And here's the key. You are not just a person trying to keep up with life. You are an expression of a vast, intelligent field of consciousness. Fluid, powerful, full of potential, slowly beginning to remember itself through your human form. The things you thought were random, emotional blocks, strange dreams, sharp intuition, are actually signals from deeper layers of yourself, asking to be reconnected. This video isn't just about inspiration. The goal is to help you see the map, and more importantly, recognize where you are on it. At the end of the video, I'll share a few simple, practical methods you can start using right away, not to escape everyday life, but to anchor higher awareness into it, through how you eat, breathe, choose, and relate to others. If something in this message resonates, if it stirs something real in you, please like, subscribe, and share this video, not to chase numbers, but to expand the space for meaningful, grounded conversations about consciousness. A journey we're all walking, whether we realize it or not. It's time to live differently, to live awake, to live real. Have you ever felt completely lost? Like nothing makes sense, and you're just drifting through life without direction? That feeling, as unsettling as it is, actually mirrors how the universe began. Scientists call the very first moment of the universe the Planck Epoch. It's a fraction of a second after the Big Bang, where everything, space, time, energy, matter, existed in a state of total uncertainty. There were no rules yet, no structure, no order. Imagine a pot of boiling water, but instead of bubbles, it's reality itself bubbling with possibilities. Nothing had taken shape. It was pure chaos. But this chaos wasn't a mistake. It was necessary. It's where everything came from. Now, bring that idea down to a human level. Emotionally and mentally, we all go through our own versions of this early chaos. For many, it shows up as depression, burnout, or a deep sense of confusion. You might feel like you're stuck in fog. You're tired, unmotivated, and nothing seems to give you clarity or peace. It's hard to see any pattern or progress. You're not sure what's next, or if next even exists. Sound familiar? Buddhism has a word for this kind of experience: samsara. It's the endless cycle of suffering, confusion, and unfulfilled desire. In this view, we're not just sad or stressed. We're caught in a loop, reacting without awareness, chasing things we think will make us happy, only to feel empty again. It's not a flaw in us. It's part of being human. And just like the universe in its earliest form, we start in disorder before we find direction. What's powerful about this idea is that it normalizes the mess. Feeling lost isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's part of the process. Just like the universe needed its moment of chaos to become stars, galaxies, and eventually life, we often need these moments of confusion to grow into something new. The key is to recognize it for what it is, a beginning, not the end. What lies beneath the chaos? After the turbulence of confusion, whether in the early universe or in our personal lives, there's a deeper layer. This second layer is where things begin to hold potential, even if nothing is visible yet. It's the space where form hasn't emerged, but the foundation is quietly taking shape. In physics and philosophy alike, this layer is often described through two interwoven ideas: the source and the void. Let's start with the source. In modern theoretical physics, This is sometimes referred to as the unified field, a fundamental field of energy from which all particles and forces arise. Albert Einstein searched for it in his attempts to unify gravity with the other fundamental forces of nature. Later, physicists like Nassim Haramein expanded on this idea, proposing that the universe is connected by a single field of energy and information, a dynamic web that underlies everything we can observe. It's not something we see directly, but it's what everything emerges from, kind of like the still water beneath waves. The activity on the surface only makes sense if you understand what lies below. This concept suggests that at the root of all matter, time, and space, there's a single source, a unified field of potential, order, and coherence. What's fascinating is that this field doesn't just exist out there in the cosmos. If it truly underlies everything, then we're part of it too. Our thoughts, our bodies, our experiences, all emerge from this same energetic foundation. That's a powerful idea. It points to a deeper connection between us and the universe, not just metaphorically but scientifically. Now, alongside this source is the void. But this isn't emptiness in the way we normally think about it. It's not a vacuum or a dead zone. In quantum physics, there's a concept called superposition, where particles don't exist in one fixed state, but in many states at once until observed. The void is something like that. It's not the absence of everything. It's the presence of all possibilities before any of them take form. Religious and spiritual traditions have long tried to describe this state. In Mahayana Buddhism, there's the idea of sunyata, often translated as emptiness, but more accurately understood as the absence of fixed identity. Nothing has a permanent, separate existence. Everything is interdependent, fluid, potential. Similarly, in Kabbalah, there's the notion of the divine before creation. God not as a figure, but as infinite, formless potential. Before the light, before the word, there was just being. So why does this matter? Because this state of source and void isn't just about the distant birth of the universe. It's something we tap into when we hit a pause in life, when we step back from the noise, when we stop identifying with our roles, achievements, or failures. In that stillness, when nothing seems certain or solid, there's a strange kind of freedom, can feel unsettling, even scary, but it's also where new insight begins. If the first layer, chaos, was about collapse and disorientation, this second layer is about quiet potential. It's the deep breath after the storm. Not yet action, but readiness. Not yet form, but foundation. And from here, anything can begin. Why does everything seem to come in pairs? Light and dark, good and bad, joy and sorrow, male and female. This third layer, duality, is where the universe and consciousness itself begins to take shape through contrast. It's the first split from the unified whole, the moment when potential starts to express itself through polarity. In the story of the cosmos, duality emerges after the stillness of source and void. It's the first ripple on a calm surface. Everything that exists needs a boundary, a contrast, a tension. Without night, there's no concept of day. Without silence, sound has no meaning. Physicists have explored this idea in their own language. In quantum mechanics, the famous double-slit experiment shows that particles don't have a definite state until they are observed. A photon can behave like a wave or a particle, but what it becomes depends on how we look at it. In a strange way, consciousness helps shape reality. And it does so by making distinctions, by noticing difference. From this view, duality isn't just a philosophical concept. It's a necessary function of awareness. We can't know one thing without the other. You recognize peace because you've known stress. You appreciate love more deeply after heartbreak. Suffering and joy are not just opposites. They define each other. They give each other meaning. Many ancient traditions understood this. In Chinese philosophy, yin and yang aren't enemies, they're partners. One flows into the other. Darkness contains the seed of light and vice versa. It's a dance, not a war. But modern spiritual culture sometimes misses this point. There's a trend that says we should eliminate negativity, as if discomfort and pain are mistakes we need to transcend. Sounds uplifting, but in practice it often becomes a form of denial. We end up resisting half of life. The truth is, growth doesn't come from rejecting one side of the spectrum. It comes from integrating both. Think about a tree. It doesn't just grow upward into the sunlight. It also sends roots deep into the earth. It finds balance through tension. Human evolution, emotionally and spiritually, works the same way. We expand by holding opposites without needing one to win. You've probably lived this already. Maybe you went through a hard time, grief, failure, burnout, and came out of it more grounded, more compassionate, more awake. Not in spite of the pain, but because of it. It didn't just test you. It revealed something in you you didn't know was there. That's the deeper purpose of duality. It's not just to create contrast. It's to create awareness. Of course, it's uncomfortable. Holding opposites requires emotional strength. It's easier to pick sides, to label things good or bad, and try to get rid of the uncomfortable half. But real evolution happens when we can stay with the full picture, not collapse into darkness, but not flee from it either. To understand that light is not the absence of dark. It's what emerges when we bring consciousness to it. So in this third layer, reality becomes complex. It's no longer just undifferentiated potential. It's patterned, polarized, alive with contrast. And that's where meaning is born. Duality is not a flaw in the system. It's the system beginning to wake up. Think about sunlight streaming through a window. On its own, the light looks pure, almost invisible. But when it passes through a prism, it splits into a full spectrum of colors, each one distinct, yet all part of the same source. This is a helpful way to begin understanding the fourth layer, godhead, the purest form of consciousness before it fractures into individual experience. At this level, we're no longer talking about chaos, potential, or polarity. We're now in the realm of pure awareness, a kind of superconsciousness that holds within it every possibility of being, without yet becoming anything in particular. It's not a god in the traditional, bearded in the sky sense. It's more like a vast intelligence behind the scenes, silent and invisible, yet present in everything. Hinduism calls this Atman, the eternal self that is also one with Brahman, the absolute. In mystical theology, it's referred to as the formless God, the divine essence before it takes on names, shapes, or stories. Interestingly, quantum physics gives us metaphors that echo this idea. The way light behaves, for instance. A single beam of white light contains every color, but it takes something like a prism to reveal the diversity hidden within. In this analogy, the white light is consciousness itself, the godhead, and the prism is the universe. Each of us, each experience, each life, is like one strand of color refracted from the same source. What suggests that this is more than just poetic metaphor? Look at the patterns. Across nature and the cosmos, we find repeating structures that hint at some kind of intelligent design, not in a religious sense, but in terms of symmetry, proportion, and mathematical elegance. The Fibonacci sequence appears in sunflowers, hurricanes, galaxies, even the proportions of the human face. The golden ratio, roughly 1.618, isn't just beautiful. It shows up in art, architecture, DNA, and the spiral of seashells. Then there's sacred geometry, found in ancient spiritual symbols and modern fractal patterns alike, suggesting that the universe is not just random matter but patterned mind. These aren't just coincidences. They point to a foundational intelligence embedded in the fabric of reality, something that doesn't just observe the world, but expresses itself as the world. Here's where it gets personal. If this superconsciousness contains all expressions, and you are an expression, then that same intelligence flows through you. You're not separate from it, you are it, localized for a while in a human life. This is what the mystics have always said in different words. The kingdom of God is within you. Tat tvam aci. You are that. The self is not different from the absolute. So this layer, the Godhead, isn't something to worship from afar. It's something to remember within yourself. Before thought, before emotion, before personality, there is a kind of knowing, a stillness, a presence. It doesn't speak in words, but in the rhythm of life itself, the breath, the heartbeat, the unfolding of events. And in that recognition, something shifts. You're no longer just a separate self trying to figure out the universe. You begin to realize you are the universe, briefly experiencing itself as you. This is the most incomprehensible thing about the universe. It is comprehensible. Albert Einstein. We begin the fifth layer universal plan with this quote, because it captures something deeply puzzling yet profoundly important. The universe follows rules. Elegant, consistent mathematical rules. From the spin of electrons to the orbit of galaxies, reality behaves in astonishingly predictable ways. This suggests that things didn't just fall into place by chance. They were arranged with intent, or at least with structure. This is where the idea of a universal plan comes in. At this level, we're not talking about destiny in a personal horoscope kind of way. We're talking about the architecture of reality itself. Many scientists and philosophers, even without invoking religion, have wrestled with this. If the laws of physics had been just slightly different, stars couldn't form, chemistry wouldn't work, and life as we know it would be impossible. The universe seems fine-tuned for complexity, for stability, and even for consciousness to emerge. Stephen Hawking himself admitted, "The laws of science, as we know them at present, contain many fundamental numbers that seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life." This idea overlaps with what's sometimes called design intelligence, the notion that the universe isn't random, but shaped by a kind of foundational intelligence. Not necessarily a god with a personality, but more like a principle of organization that guides how things unfold. You could call it a cosmic blueprint, not rigid or deterministic, but deeply coherent. Of course, the dominant voice in science, especially evolutionary biology, pushes back on this. Natural selection, random mutation, and the emergence of complexity over time offer a powerful explanation for how life evolves without needing a designer. The argument goes, order doesn't need a plan, it just needs time and variation. And that view is valid within its scope. But physics tells a bigger story. The fact that we can describe the universe with mathematics at all, that we can predict eclipses, measure entropy, calculate black holes, raises the question, why does nature follow any laws to begin with? Why not pure chaos? Even scientists who don't believe in a creator sometimes admit that the structure of reality feels suspiciously intentional. Einstein wasn't religious, but he often referred to a sense of awe at the mind of God, his way of describing the deep intelligence he saw in nature's design. Not divine intervention, but divine precision. So what does this mean for us? It means we're not adrift in a meaningless void. Whether you see it as physics, spirit, or both, there seems to be a pattern, a trajectory, something the universe is doing, becoming, unfolding, and you're a part of it. Your life isn't an accident. Your experiences, your growth, your challenges, these too might fit within a wider context. The universal plan isn't about control. It's about coherence. A sense that, beneath all the seeming randomness, there is a deep logic at work. One that invites us not just to survive, but to understand and maybe even to align with it. Have you ever suddenly known something you can't explain? An insight that came out of nowhere? A feeling of deep familiarity with a place you've never been? Or a solution to a problem that just appeared fully formed in your mind? That's the doorway into the sixth layer, oversoul. This level refers to a kind of shared consciousness, a collective reservoir of knowledge, memory, and experience that transcends the individual. Psychologist Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious, a part of the psyche that holds ancestral memory and universal symbols. According to Jung, we're not born as blank slates. Instead, we inherit mental blueprints, archetypes, instincts, and emotional patterns that shape how we see the world. The oversoul takes that idea even further. Imagine a giant, invisible network connecting all minds, past, present, and even future. You're an individual, yes, but your consciousness is plugged into something far larger. Every thought, every experience, every lesson learned by anyone, anywhere, doesn't just disappear, it becomes part of this field. In Eastern spiritual traditions, this is similar to the Akashic records, a kind of energetic archive that contains the full story of the universe. Not a physical library, but a dimension of reality where information is stored and can be accessed through expanded states of awareness. This might sound abstract, but you've likely touched this layer in ordinary ways. Think about when artists say a piece came through them, not from them. Or when inventors and scientists report flashes of inspiration that arrived like downloads. Intuition, the gut feeling that bypasses logic, could also be your mind brushing against the oversoul, picking up signals you didn't consciously ask for. Dreams are another window. Have you ever had a dream that felt larger than your personal life? Something symbolic, mythic, or deeply emotional without a clear cause? That could be material surfacing from this collective field. It's not fantasy. It's pattern recognition happening on a deeper level. One fascinating example is the phenomenon of random knowing. People who recall information, skills, or even languages they never consciously studied. While some skeptics chalk it up to chance or subconscious exposure, others suggest it might be evidence of tapping into a shared memory bank. If knowledge is stored energetically, rather than locally in the brain, then perhaps what we call learning is sometimes more like remembering, tuning into frequencies that are already out there. The oversoul isn't just about knowledge. It's about connection. At this level, you start to realize that your personal growth ripples out. Your healing contributes to a larger healing. Your insights expand the collective. This is where individuality begins to soften, not because it disappears, but because it finds its context. You're not just a self-contained mind, floating in isolation. You're part of a shared human journey, linked through symbols, stories, instincts, and intuition. The oversoul is where we remember that wisdom isn't always taught. It's inherited, shared, and sometimes simply received. And the more open we become to this layer, through creativity, stillness, and inner listening, the more we can access its depth. It's not about being mystical. It's about being receptive. The library is always open. The question is, are you listening? You've probably had a moment, maybe in meditation, maybe during a crisis, where you felt something or someone was guiding you. Not a loud voice or a dramatic vision, but a calm presence. A quiet sense of support or insight that didn't feel like it came from your ordinary mind. That moment points to the seventh layer, Archangels and Ascended Masters. This layer isn't about winged figures from Sunday school, or shining beings in robes. Instead, think of these beings as symbols or expressions of higher states of consciousness. They represent wisdom, compassion, clarity, and guidance beyond the personal ego. In different spiritual traditions, they take different names and forms. In Buddhism, they're known as bodhisattvas, beings who've awakened, but choose to remain close to humanity to help others awaken too. In Christianity, we talk about guardian angels, energetic protectors or messengers of divine intelligence. In the mystical tradition of Kabbalah, we find the Sephirot, 10 emanations through which divine energy flows into the world. So what are we really talking about here? Not mythical beings floating in the sky, but consciousness that's evolved beyond the individual. These entities, if you want to call them that, can be understood as archetypes, living patterns of intelligence that exist across cultures and time. Think of them less like characters and more like frequencies. You don't see radio waves, but tune into the right channel and you can hear music. Likewise, by shifting your inner state, through meditation, prayer, service, or even deep creative flow, you can align with these higher frequencies of consciousness. For example, when someone is in deep grief and suddenly feels a calm strength helping them keep going, that could be considered a connection with a master energy, like the archetype of compassion embodied by Kuan Yin, or Archangel Raphael's healing presence. Or think of artists who say their greatest work felt channeled rather than created. They were, in essence, tuning into a field of intelligence beyond their personal mind. But this isn't about blind belief or waiting for a sign. The seventh layer is invitational. It asks for your participation. Connection doesn't come from worship. It comes from resonance. And we reach resonance by practicing the same qualities these higher intelligences embody: service, courage, wisdom, love. When you act selflessly, when you offer compassion without expecting something back, when you ask sincerely for insight and stay open, you're tuning in. Science doesn't have a framework for this yet, though quantum theories about non-local consciousness are starting to suggest that mind may not be entirely contained in the brain. But for now, the language of mysticism speaks most clearly here. What matters isn't proving whether these energies exist in a traditional sense. What matters is how they function. They guide, they support, they elevate. You don't have to believe in angels to experience grace. You don't have to know the names of the masters to feel guided. But recognizing this layer can shift how you live. You stop trying to carry everything alone. You become more attuned to signs, synchronicities, and subtle nudges. You trust the invisible currents moving through your life. And in doing so, you remember something essential. You're not here to grind your way through life. You're part of a larger unfolding. There's help, wisdom, and love available, if you're willing to listen, open, and align. The eighth layer, crystalline grid, comes from a blend of ancient wisdom and modern energy science. It's the idea that Earth isn't just a rock floating in space, but a living system with its own energetic architecture. Indigenous cultures, ancient civilizations, and modern mystics have all spoken of energy lines, sacred sites, and power points across the planet. Today, we're beginning to understand this not as myth, but as part of a larger energetic network, a kind of planetary nervous system. This grid is thought to be built on principles of sacred geometry, the same geometric patterns that appear in the structure of crystals, flowers, seashells, and galaxies. These patterns don't just look beautiful, they reflect balance, coherence, and resonance. Applied on a planetary scale, they form a framework through which energy flows across Earth, connecting not just natural features like mountains and oceans, but also human consciousness. Here's where it gets even more interesting. The crystalline grid isn't just an external phenomenon. It corresponds with what science is now exploring as the biofield, the energetic field surrounding and informing all living systems, including humans. It also overlaps with ideas from quantum physics, where consciousness may not be confined to the brain, but may instead interact with a unified field of information. This grid acts like an energetic internet. Each person is a node. Our thoughts, emotions, and states of consciousness ripple into the field and influence the collective experience. That's why collective meditation, mass prayer, or even synchronized emotional events can have measurable effects, not just on people, but on physical systems like weather, crime rates, or biological rhythms. Take, for example, the Global Consciousness Project. Using random number generators stationed around the world, researchers noticed that during major global events, 9/11 natural disasters, worldwide meditations, these machines would show significant statistical deviations. In other words, when human minds are unified around a shared emotional experience, something shifts in the environment itself. It's as if the field listens. The crystalline grid, in this sense, is not metaphorical. It's a real-time feedback system between human consciousness and planetary energy. And it's influenced not just by what we do, but how we think and feel. Fear, anger, division, they disrupt coherence in the grid. Love, intention, unity, they strengthen it. This gives a whole new meaning to personal practice. When you meditate, heal, forgive, or simply choose peace, you're not just helping yourself. You're adding clarity to the grid. You're feeding harmony into the shared field that surrounds us all. Your inner work becomes part of the planet's transformation. And just like neural networks in the brain, the more we activate these points of coherence, the stronger the grid becomes. Sacred sites like the pyramids, Machu Picchu, Stonehenge are thought to sit at key intersections in this energetic matrix. But the real magic happens when ordinary people anywhere begin to wake up to their role in the system. So the crystalline grid isn't about crystals in the ground. It's about the crystalline quality of awareness. Clear, structured, resonant. It's a reminder that we're all connected, not just spiritually but energetically. The earth feels us, and together we shape the field. Why study the ninth layer, the mental plane? Because this is where your thoughts stop being private and start shaping reality. Not metaphorically, but energetically. The mental plane is the layer where thought itself becomes frequency, where your mindset, beliefs, and inner dialogue begin to influence the external world. At this level, everything you think and imagine carries a vibration. Just like sound creates waves in the air or light carries energy, your thoughts send out patterns into the energetic field around you. And those patterns interact with other people, with situations, and even with matter. That's why understanding this layer isn't just about mindset. It's about how consciousness works as a force. This is the basis for practices like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which shows how language and thought patterns influence behavior and emotional states. When you change your internal language, your experience of reality changes too. Similarly, the theory of resonance suggests that like attracts like, not because of luck or magic, but because frequencies seek harmony. Positive, coherent thinking tends to magnetize experiences that match it. Not instantly, not always literally, but often with surprising consistency. A famous, though controversial, example of this is the work of Masaru Emoto, who studied how words, music, and intention affected the crystalline structure of water. When water was exposed to loving words or harmonious music, its frozen crystals formed beautiful, symmetrical patterns. When exposed to hate, anger, or chaos, the crystals broke into distorted, jagged shapes. While his methods have been debated, the core idea resonates with ancient teachings and modern energy psychology. Thoughts matter, literally. This doesn't mean every stray thought creates your future. The mental plane is more about dominant patterns. The stories you tell yourself repeatedly, the beliefs you carry without question, the emotional charge behind your thoughts. These create a mental climate that influences not only your perception but the outcomes you draw toward you. Ever notice how someone in a negative mental loop seems to attract more conflict, while someone grounded and optimistic tends to open doors without forcing them? That's the mental plane in action. It's not superstition. It's the interaction between energy and intention. But here's the important part. This layer is highly responsive. You can train it. Practices like meditation, journaling, reframing, affirmations, and conscious language don't just feel good, they literally shift your mental frequency. And that shift ripples outward. So why does this matter now more than ever? Because we live in a world overloaded with thought, news, opinions, fears, distractions. The mental plane is crowded, but your ability to discern and direct your thoughts is a superpower. When used consciously, it becomes a tool for healing, focus, and creation. When left unchecked, it can trap you in cycles of anxiety and limitation. This layer is a reminder, your mind is not just a storage system, it's a transmitter. What are you sending out? And what are you prepared to receive in return? The 10th layer, astral plane, is where things start to feel surreal. This is the realm where emotions take shape, where thoughts and feelings don't just stay inside your mind, they project outward into fluid, symbolic form. If you've ever had a vivid dream that felt more real than waking life, or an intense emotion that seemed to shift the air around you, you've already touched this layer. The astral plane is often described as the bridge between the physical world and the higher, more subtle layers of consciousness. It's not out there in space. It exists in a different frequency of perception, closely tied to our emotional and subconscious life. In spiritual traditions, it's known as the realm of dreams, visions, and psychic experiences. In psychology, it aligns with the subconscious, the storehouse of repressed feelings, forgotten memories, and archetypal symbols. Carl Jung called this the domain of the shadow self, the parts of us we don't always want to see, but that shape our lives from beneath the surface. What makes the astral plane unique is that emotion is the substance here. If the physical world is shaped by atoms and matter, the astral world is shaped by emotional energy. Joy, fear, anger, love, they all form patterns, landscapes, even beings in this dimension. That's why people who undergo near-death experiences or deep hypnotherapy often report vivid journeys filled with symbolic places, colors, or entities that seem to respond to their emotional state. You don't just feel fear here, you see it and it sees you back. Dreams are one of the most common ways we access this plane. Ever had a dream where your house was on fire, your teeth were falling out, or you were flying over a strange city? Those aren't random. They're the emotional content of your life being translated into astral imagery. And it's not limited to sleep. Practices like astral projection, guided meditation, and past life regression are all ways of navigating this emotional energy layer consciously. But there's a catch. Because the astral world is shaped by emotion, it's easy to get overwhelmed or misled. If you enter with fear, fear meets you. If you bring unresolved trauma or chaotic thoughts, the experience can become turbulent or distorted. This is why emotional mastery is essential at this level. Not in the sense of suppressing your feelings, but in learning to observe and regulate them. It's like sailing on open water. Your inner state becomes the wind and the waves. Many energy practitioners and spiritual seekers experience astral interference, confusing visions, emotional heaviness, or symbolic nightmares, when their emotional energy is out of balance. The key isn't to avoid the astral plane, but to enter it with grounded awareness. Techniques like breathwork, emotional release, journaling, and even therapy can clear emotional noise and help you navigate this layer with more clarity. On the flip side, when you're emotionally aligned, the astral world becomes a space of immense creativity, healing, and insight. Artists, mystics, and shamans throughout history have drawn inspiration from this plane, receiving music, stories, or visions that felt as if they came from somewhere beyond the logical mind. That's not imagination gone wild. It's the emotional subconscious communicating in its native language, symbol, metaphor, and energy. So, the astral plane isn't just a dreamy escape or spiritual curiosity. It's a vital part of your internal system. It reflects you, teaches you, and challenges you to feel more deeply, but also more responsibly. The more you come to understand your emotions, the clearer and more constructive your astral experiences become. Because in this realm, emotion isn't just a response. It's the architecture, and you, whether you know it or not, are the architect. The 11th layer, etheric plane, is where energy becomes life. This is the subtle field that surrounds and interpenetrates the physical body, often referred to in Eastern traditions as Qi, China, Prana, India, or Ki, Japan. It's not visible to the naked eye, but its effects are felt every day. Your sense of vitality, your resilience, even how fast you heal, all trace back to this energetic layer. According to these ancient systems, the body isn't just made of flesh and bone. It has a blueprint, an energetic duplicate that guides its structure and function. This etheric body is considered the first layer of the aura, the most closely linked to the physical form. When the etheric field is strong and balanced, the body tends to be healthy. When it's distorted or depleted, illness can take root, often before symptoms appear physically. Modern science is beginning to catch glimpses of this idea. Research into biophotons, tiny packets of light emitted by living cells, suggests that the human body constantly communicates through low-level electromagnetic signals. These aren't just byproducts of metabolism. They may actually help regulate biological processes. Techniques like gas discharge visualization, GDV, and other forms of biofield imaging are allowing scientists to measure energetic changes around the body, especially during healing, stress, or meditation. This recognition bridges ancient wisdom and modern inquiry. Where traditional medicine focuses on treating symptoms, etheric work looks at the energetic cause. It's not about replacing medicine. It's about expanding our understanding of health. In this view, energy imbalance precedes physical imbalance. Clear the energetic blockage, and the body can often correct itself. Practices like acupuncture, Reiki, Qigong, and yoga have long worked with this etheric layer. So has meditation, especially when focused on breath or internal stillness. These practices don't just relax the body, they restore flow. Because energy, like water, stagnates when blocked. And when it flows, life moves more smoothly, physically, emotionally, and even mentally. Think of the etheric plane as the operating system beneath your physical hardware. You don't see it directly, but when it runs smoothly, everything else works better. And like an operating system, it responds to attention. The more intentional you are with your energy, what you consume, how you rest, how you breathe, the more coherent your etheric field becomes. This isn't mystical, it's practical. People often report feeling lighter, clearer, more grounded after energy work. Not because they believe in it, but because their systems recognize the alignment. The body listens to the field. So if you're feeling off, tired, stuck, it might not be just physical or emotional. It could be your etheric blueprint asking for a tune-up. And the good news? You already have the tools: breath, movement, stillness, and intention. The etheric plane responds to them all. Because at this level, you're not just a body, you're energy in motion. And how that energy moves is the foundation of how you live. The 12th and final layer, physical plane and the matrix, is where everything condenses. This is the world we touch, see, and move through daily. It feels solid, measurable, real. But here's the twist. Physics tells us that matter is just energy slowed down. The atoms that make up your body, your phone, your house, they're 99.999% empty space. What you experience as solid is actually a dance of vibration and frequency, interpreted by your nervous system. In other words, solidity is a sensory illusion. This insight leads us to a deeper question. If physical reality is just the surface layer of something far more fluid and energetic, what else are we mistaking for truth? Enter the Matrix, not just the sci-fi movie concept, but a useful metaphor for a deeper psychological pattern. The Matrix represents a programmed system of beliefs, roles, and routines that most of us are born into without questioning. From early childhood, we're taught to follow a script. Go to school, get a job, buy things, climb a ladder, retire, die. Productivity equals value. Consumption equals fulfillment. Status equals success. But is that your belief or just the one you were handed? The Matrix isn't inherently evil. It's a structure. The danger lies in mistaking the structure for reality itself. When you unconsciously accept inherited systems, educational, economic, cultural, as the only truth, you stop asking the deeper questions. Who am I really? What do I value outside of what I've been told to want? What's actually fulfilling for me? Of course, not everyone is fully trapped. Some people consciously navigate the system, using it as a tool rather than being used by it. But for many, the programming runs deep. Beliefs about worth, success, identity, and time are so embedded they feel like facts. That's how the Matrix maintains control, not through force but through consensus. You don't have to be locked in a cage. If everyone around you agrees the invisible walls are real, Escaping the matrix doesn't mean rejecting society, quitting your job, or living off-grid. Unless that truly calls to you, it means waking up, becoming aware of the scripts running in your mind, noticing which thoughts are genuinely yours, and which were downloaded from family, media, or culture without your consent. This process is subtle and personal. It might start with a moment of discomfort, feeling like you're living someone else's life. It might come during burnout, loss, or spiritual awakening. However it arrives, it's a signal. There's more. More to life than routine. More to you than roles. More to reality than appearances. The key is intentional awareness. Ask questions. Sit with discomfort. Examine the rewards the system offers and what they cost. When you recognize that much of what drives modern life is a loop of stimulation and distraction, you begin to reclaim your agency. You stop reacting and start choosing. Ironically, the physical plane, often dismissed as the lowest layer, is where everything becomes visible. It's the proving ground. All the energy, emotion, thought, and intention from the layers above manifest here. Your health, your relationships, your career, even the world's systems. They're reflections of inner architecture, both personal and collective. So no, the matrix doesn't fully control you unless you let it. The structure exists, but awareness creates space. And in that space, you can begin to live differently, consciously, creatively, freely. Because the greatest illusion isn't just that matter is solid. It's that you have no power within it. But the truth is, you are a creator inside the matrix. And once you realize that, the rules start to bend. Ascension, the rising of consciousness, isn't a bonus stage tacked onto the 12 layers. It's the natural outcome of understanding and integrating them. As you journey through each plane, from chaos to clarity, from thought to energy, from the material world to subtle fields, you begin to see reality differently. Not just intellectually, but experientially. And that shift, that's what we call ascension. But let's be clear. This isn't about floating away from the world, escaping suffering, or becoming superhuman. Ascension is the release of false identity, the layers of programming, fear, and inherited belief that keep you operating on autopilot. It's about raising your personal frequency by shedding what's not truly you. As you do, your thoughts become clearer, your emotions more grounded, your choices more aligned. This is what many spiritual traditions point to in different ways. In Buddhism, it's called enlightenment, seeing through illusion and ending suffering at its root. In Christianity, it's sanctification, the gradual transformation into a purer, more divine version of the self. In both paths, the emphasis isn't on becoming perfect. It's on becoming real. What makes ascension different from spiritual fantasy is that it comes with friction. This isn't a smooth, glowing transition. It often starts with discomfort, emotional upheaval, confusion, even physical symptoms. You may feel like your old life doesn't fit anymore, like you're out of sync with people or routines you once relied on. That's because your inner system is recalibrating. Your nervous system, your energy field, your emotional patterns, they're all adjusting to a higher frequency. Some common signs of this shift include sudden bursts of intuition, sensitivity to energy or people, vivid dreams, or moments of deep clarity that vanish just as quickly. You might swing between bliss and anxiety, certainty and doubt. That's not regression, it's detox. You're letting go of an old operating system, and it takes time for the new one to stabilize. Skeptics might say this is just emotional or psychological turbulence, not some grand spiritual process. And in a way, they're right, because ascension is psychological. It's also physical, the spiritual. It's all of it. The process doesn't separate your human experience from your consciousness. It integrates them. That's what makes it powerful. You're not escaping reality. You're meeting it fully with eyes wide open. This isn't about avoiding pain. It's about facing it, feeling it, understanding where it came from, and finally letting it go. Ascension means realizing that the fears you've carried, the beliefs you've inherited, the roles you've performed, they aren't you. They were necessary for a time, but now they're ready to be released. The result isn't instant peace or constant bliss. It's freedom, not the absence of challenge, but the presence of clarity. You begin to respond instead of react. You choose instead of obey. You live from your center, not from the noise. So ascension isn't a destination. It's a process, a spiraling, sometimes messy, always sacred return to your truest self. The layers you've explored weren't just steps on a ladder. They were mirrors, maps, reminders. And now, with all that insight integrated, you're not becoming someone else. You're finally becoming you. Integration is where the real work begins. After exploring the 12 layers of consciousness and moving through the ascension process, it's tempting to stay up there in the abstract, the meditative, the mystical. But the whole point of expanded awareness is to live it. Integration means bringing that higher consciousness into your everyday life. Not just in sacred moments, but in the mundane ones too. Think of it like this: enlightenment isn't what happens on the meditation cushion. It's how you handle a traffic jam, a rude email, or your child having a meltdown at dinner. Spiritual integration is the art of showing up differently. Not by pretending to be peaceful, but by being more conscious in every little thing you do. Let's make this real with a simple example: eating. Before integration, you might eat distractedly, scrolling your phone, rushing, or emotionally coping through food. With integration, eating becomes a sacred act. You pause before the first bite. You breathe. You notice the colors, textures, and flavors. You feel gratitude not just because someone told you to, but because you're actually present. That presence carries a different energy. It nourishes more than your body, it feeds your awareness. Or take breathing. You breathe all day without thinking. But when you consciously breathe, even just for a few minutes, it shifts your state. You calm your nervous system, slow your thoughts, and realign with the present moment. That one act of awareness can ripple into how you speak, how you react, how you make decisions. It's subtle, but it's powerful. This is what some call combat spiritualism or real-world spirituality. Not retreating from life to be spiritual, but turning life into the practice. Doing the dishes becomes a meditation. Listening to a friend becomes a healing exchange. Writing an email becomes an opportunity to transmit clarity and kindness. Every action holds energy, and you, in every moment, are shaping that energy. Here's a practice you can try. Pick one ordinary task, like brushing your teeth, walking to work, or preparing coffee. For 1 week, turn that task into your anchor. Every time you do it, drop into full awareness. No autopilot, no multitasking, just presence. Notice how your energy shifts. Notice how your relationship to the moment deepens. This is integration in action. And when things go wrong, because they will, that's part of the practice too. Integration doesn't mean becoming flawless. It means becoming responsive, not reactive. When you catch yourself falling into old patterns, judgment, frustration, fear, you pause, you breathe, you remember, I have a choice. That micro moment of awareness is where transformation happens. Another key aspect of integration is energy hygiene. Just like you brush your teeth or clean your home, your energy field needs maintenance too. Simple practices like grounding, breath work, movement, or even just getting sunlight can help stabilize the shifts you've made. You're not just taking care of your mind and body, you're tuning your whole field. Remember, the goal isn't to become a saint, it's to become real, to live in alignment with your deepest knowing, to bridge the divine and the daily, to move through the world not as someone who knows more, but someone who is more present. Integration is the final step, but it's also ongoing. Every choice you make, every moment you enter with awareness, is an act of co-creation with the universe. You're not just reacting to life anymore, you're shaping it one conscious breath, word, and action at a time. At some point in your journey, a question begins to echo louder than the rest. Am I being created, or am I creating? Am I just a piece in life's machinery, moved by forces beyond my control? Or am I the one shaping this reality from within? This is the essence of the 16th and final layer, creator versus creation. It's not a riddle to solve, but a perspective to embody. It asks you to stop drifting and choose, not blindly react to life, but decide who you are in relation to it. When you feel like life is happening to you, you become the creation. A product of your past, your culture, your upbringing. Your thoughts are recycled. Your reactions are programmed. You move through days like a leaf in the current, responsive but not directive. And while there's safety in that, there's also a quiet frustration. The sense that you're waiting for something, a sign, a change, a permission slip to finally live differently. But what if that permission never comes? On the other hand, stepping into the role of creator means claiming responsibility. Not in a heavy, burdensome way, but as an act of empowerment. You start to see that your thoughts sculpt your perception. Your energy influences your environment, and your choices ripple far beyond what you can see. You're not waiting for the universe to hand you a life. You're in partnership with it, shaping your reality from the inside out. Still, there's a deeper truth here. You're both. You are the river and the one who chooses how to swim. You are the music and the dancer. The wisest path isn't to cling to control or surrender completely. It's to move with discernment. There are moments to lead, to direct, to push forward. And there are moments to pause, trust, and let life unfold. This dance between surrender and creation is where real mastery lives. Some days you'll need to step into full authorship. Speak the truth, make the move, change the pattern. Other days, the deepest power will come from letting go. Listening instead of forcing, accepting instead of fixing. Integration means knowing when to be which. So here's the call. Don't settle for being only a passenger in your life. Don't wait for perfect clarity or for someone else to choose for you. Take the brush, start painting, write the line, speak the intention, claim your role in the cosmic script, but be wise enough to leave room for improvisation. Because yes, you were created, but you were created to create. And the moment you realize that, the universe begins to respond in kind. You are not just a body, not just a personality, not just a name in a system. You are a human, a being of many shades, many layers, each one reflecting a different facet of universal consciousness. The word itself says it. Hue, meaning color or tone, speaks to the full spectrum of experience you carry. Joy and sorrow, fear and courage, chaos and clarity. All of it is part of the palette that makes you whole. But here's the deeper truth. You're not just experiencing consciousness. You are consciousness, pure, aware, infinite, choosing for a moment to live through a human form. Your thoughts, your struggles, your longings, your breakthroughs, they're not detours. They're how the universe learns about itself. This journey we've taken through the 12 layers isn't a staircase to somewhere else. It's a spiral back to what you've always been. It's not about escaping the human experience. It's about embodying it fully, with awareness, intention, and love. And the journey doesn't end here. Consciousness keeps evolving. You keep unfolding. Every moment is an invitation to go deeper, to wake up further, to love more fully. There's no finish line, only cycles of awakening, remembering, and integrating. Again and again. And each time you come closer to the truth. You were never separate in the first place. So if this message resonated, if something in you stirred, aligned, or remembered, help keep this energy moving. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who's on their own path. Not for the numbers, but to strengthen this field of awareness we're all part of. Because consciousness expands faster when we do it together. And your light helps others find their way. We're not just talking about change. We are it.